the Seek, Go, Create podcast. This is Tim Winders, your host. I'm a coach for business owners, executives, and leaders. My wife and I consider ourselves nomads. We currently live, travel, and work in our 39-foot RV. For those of you that might be catching this on video, you can see an image of that behind me. That is an image. It's not real, but it is really what's behind me. So anyway, I am recording right now from the passenger seat of our mobile office, our 39-foot RV that we have nicknamed Theo. I want to encourage all of you to listen to the end of the podcast. We'll include ways that you can continue the conversation we start today by connecting with us directly. Today, we have Caleb Guilliams as our guest. Caleb is the founder and CEO of betterwealth, a company committed to showing people how to have efficiency and control over their money today while maximizing their future wealth potential. Man, that is a mouthful. I almost messed up the word wealth because it was just right on my tongue there. But Caleb, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Hey, Tim, it is a pleasure being here, man. And I am such a huge fan of how you humbly just articulate and bring people on and share your heart. And so it's an honor to be on here.
Excellent. Caleb, it's great to have you. I'm a big fan of yours. Been listening to your podcast over the last week and checking you out like we need to do when we have guests. And man, I'm excited. I will go ahead and just say this right up front. I know the audience will not mind this. I believe we were divinely connected. And when we're divinely connected, we have to honor that. And I honor that greatly. And so the time we spend together is unto the Lord, as we will say. So listen, first question I like to ask, I don't want to get off track here. I like to ask people just a real blunt, what do you do? Give us either your short elevator pitch or whatever you want to call it. What do you do, Caleb?
It's funny because I don't necessarily love elevator pitches. And a lot of people, when they look at me, they're like, you don't even look old enough to drive a car. How in the world are you able to help me with my money? But my essential elevator pitch is living intentionally is the metric that we need to be headed towards as it relates to wealth. And most people are not handling their money. They're not thinking about themselves, and they're not using their God-given talents to best live the life that they want, best live intentionally. So I am obsessed with helping people take back control of their time, their money, and helping you use money as a tool to be most efficient with how to live your life. I think retirement is a disaster. I don't think that's the metric. But I think God has given us time and abilities and resources, and we need to use that wisely.
Yeah, that's good. Just so you know, I may not have warned you up front, but I take notes. I take copious notes while I'm interviewing. So I'll be looking down and writing in my yellow pad. I don't have the high tech anything in front of me here, but there were a few words you brought up. One of them that I wanted to jump on immediately, but I'm going to try to hold back. The word was intentionally, because that's a powerful word. But the first thing that I want to do is let's go ahead and address that elephant in the room that you brought up, which is people look at you and think you're not old enough to drive. For those that might be watching this on video, either on our YouTube channel or on the Facebook Live, you do have a young look to you. So why don't you just go ahead and share with everyone how old you are?
I'm 24 years old in an industry where the average age of a financial advisor is 58. And I got started when I was 19 and started my company when I was 21. So it's been something trust me, this is something I talk about on a daily basis.
Yeah, I know. And so you have to somewhat overcome that hurdle. In fact, reading your background, I mean, you did some things in banking when a lot of people are barely even in college. So you okay with that if I hit you with just a really kind of abrasive question right out of the gate here?
Yes.
How the heck does a 24-year-old know anything about finance and creating wealth? So let me just go ahead and get that out of the way right now.
Yep. I think there's a couple ways that you can get wisdom. It's often, I hear this quite a bit. We are drowning in a world of information. There's so much information out there, but we're starving for wisdom. And I would say my superpower is because of I'm dyslexic, I can barely read. I am motivated to finding the best. And so instead of me saying, I'm just going to learn or I'm just going to read a book, I sought experts. I sought people that would mentor me. And although it's hard for me to read, I have an ability to take complicated things and make it simple and then articulate it. And so that it was just kind of that combination of like, I truly sat at people's feet and asked questions. And I wasn't also taught like because I got into it in a non-traditional way. I wasn't taught like, this is what you do. You sell our company, you sell these products, just, I call it the sheeple, like the sheeple method. Okay. You just do what you're told. I actually had to learn what's going on. And because of my age, because I look even younger than 24, I had to really, really understand what I'm talking about. And so that combination of like, not only did I take that approach, but then I really had to go deep and understand how money is created, kept, spent, invested. And it's just made me obsessive on the topic.
In general, you just brought it up. We live in a society, culture, world where we have access to massive amounts of information. I think you said it, you might have implied it, but would you agree that the population is fairly, gosh, I hate to use the word ignorant, but it seems to apply best, fairly ignorant about money, wealth, all things related to that? Yes, no?
Yes. And I think Christians are even more ignorant.
Yeah, and I actually appreciate you saying that. It's almost as if we check our brains at the pew and make it even worse. So and we've got a lot of followers of Christ on that are our listeners, and so I hope that we got their attention with that back and forth right there. Have you been able to identify some of the reasons why?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so go ahead and fire away. I mean, I could guess some, but I'd love to hear your take, your wisdom on why is it? Why are we? I mean, I'm 56 and
Right.
I feel like I'm still learning in this area. In fact, I will at your feet get some wisdom today. I've got some
Yep.
questions for you later about that. So why is it?
So I think giving you a little context on how I would learn this gives you context of the way I'm going to answer. So one of my first jobs was actually working at a chicken farm. Okay. Without getting too graphic, let's just say I have an appreciation for a chicken sandwich. And so I started making money. And that's when I first got introduced to like people just spending as much money as they're making. And I'm like, how is this working? And then that's when I got into all kinds of investment strategies. And that got me into a bank. And then at the age of 19, I became one of the youngest people to actually run a bank's investment department. And Tim, what I could not understand was there were a lot of smart people that worked so hard in life. They worked so hard to even make more money. They had businesses, and yet they were devaluing their number one asset. I believe, and this is very biblical, but I speak, my business is not just a Christian-based business, but it's like I believe that we are our greatest asset. Like we are created and we're a function of a couple things of our time, of our ability to think and communicate. God has given us other resources. And I saw person after person after person after person not look within, but totally just go to where other people are telling them to put their money. And so what they're doing with their time, what they're doing with their expertise, what they're doing with their money is not serving anything. And I think a metric that gets us really off track is this idea of rate of return. Nothing wrong with rate of return. Rate of return is one of the functions that go into money. It's actually a form of determining what you should do long term. You can actually, through time value of money, see like, okay, rate of return over time will give my money to be more valuable. The problem is people just look at that and turn off their brain and say like, that's it. And what I want people to just do is you think of money as a tool and think about money as a tool to help you live the life that God created you to live. And so that just gives you a little bit of context. Like it's funny, on a balance sheet, on a net worth statement, you're not going to find your name on that statement at all. And yet I would argue that you are a lot of times the sole income earner. You're creating the most cash flow and you have the greatest ability to create wealth. And yet that same analogy, it's like people are devaluing the number one person in their life.
Yeah, that's very good. All right. There were about 4 or 5 things you mentioned when you were just talking, but there was one that I think I want to address first. So after working in the chicken industry, do you actually still eat a lot of chicken?
Chicken's my favorite
Really?
meat. Yes, I love chicken.
Okay, so it didn't mess you up or anything like that. Because
No,
some people say that once you see how the sausage is made, you don't want any more sausage. So you still love chicken.
I still love chicken. I'm really grateful for heat to cook chicken in, to kill
Ah,
all the bacteria.
all that stuff. So you gutted chickens there. All right. Well, so I totally agree with what you say, because that's in many ways has been part of my journey that I've shared with our audience before. We don't have to do any of that here, but I really held myself in high regard, always thought I could make more. In fact, I truthfully enjoyed chasing after business and money. Now, the challenge is I didn't respect that money as a tool like I should have. But the thing that I want to go back to before we get too far away from it is, you mentioned it, and I don't think you did it flippantly. You mentioned that many times Christians, followers of Christ, have even more ignorance about money than the general population. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't say, why do we think that believers, people that believe what happened on the cross, people that followers of Christ, why is it that they would be even a little worse than the general public?
Because I think it's all about the relationship of how you see money, and I think people are very much guilty, and they just like we don't want to talk about it. That's one of the problems that we have in America, is we don't talk about money in general, and I've seen that even more so of like like how many people know what their church, like how their church is spending their money and all that stuff. It's like you don't really ask those questions. It's all like left up into the Lord's hands. And I think the Bible talks, it's very clear when the Bible talks about money and being good stewards. And a lot of people put their identity in money. And here's the problem. If money will just enhance whatever you are. And so I've seen a lot of good people use money as a tool to be generous and serve. I've also seen a lot of people do massively bad things or just go downhill as it relates to money. It's not that the money made them go downhill or made them better. It just enhanced. It just poured gasoline on what you're currently doing. And so and I'm very type A. I'm a number 3 on the Enneagram. I've just never wanted to just be like, whatever God has put on my heart, I want to go all in. And
Yeah.
so if business is the key, then I have a moral obligation to be a successful business person, because why else am I here? Like I want to be intentional. It goes back to our mission, be intentional in everything I do. So if I'm going to be business, I don't want to be mediocre. I don't necessarily think that we got to be careful as believers. And I don't think God is wanting to just like make us be prosperous. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, I think God wants us to use our abilities and talents for the best that we can.
Yeah, to advance the kingdom is a term that I use quite a bit. It's like we need to be using it to do what we're assigned to do within his kingdom. And I think
Yep.
we all have our assignments. And I think I've talked about this often, Caleb. I think my role and your role and everyone listening, if they consider themselves a follower, is to daily, weekly, monthly, find out what our assignment is. That's what we're supposed to do. So in light of that, I want to back up a little bit now, because you're only 24. We don't have to go back too far, but I want to talk a little bit about growing up, because I think some of those entrenched beliefs about money start at a young age.
Yep.
And again, a lot of it's societal, and we have a very uh, puritanical culture in America that you don't ask certain questions and all that. I like to say, hey, how much do you make? What do you make? That kind of thing. Sometimes people don't like that, but tell us a little bit. I want to tell the audience, because if I'm a listener, there's a number of things going through my mind right now. We're going to want to get to some specific strategies and techniques and tips that you have. But I really, as a listener and the host, because I get to ask the questions, I want to know how you developed this mindset around money. So, tell us about growing up, a little about your parents, what they did, maybe anything that contributed or was a deterrent to your mindset about money growing up.
Yeah, love that question. Thank you for asking. I was the oldest of 6 kids, was homeschooled. My dad was a PhD molecular biologist, wrote many books, very well known in the natural medicine world and healthy lifestyle. And I wanted to be a doctor for about a week. And then I took biology 1 and realized that for some reason, I don't know how genes work or DNA, but I didn't get a lot of my dad's DNA apparently, because I did not do well in science 101. So I grew up in a home where my parents were faith-based. I was baptized in the Sea of Galilee. I've been to Israel twice before 18. So I had an amazing upbringing, but my parents were not entrepreneurs, but they taught me a couple things. Number one, they taught me to be proactive. And that I cannot stress proactiveness enough. If you're a parent and have kids, just seek, have your kids have them be proactive. So my dad, I did not like working with him early on because he would be like, Caleb, you just sit around. Don't just sit around waiting for me to tell me what to do. Start seeking what you need to do. Another story that I'll say that my dad did is when I got an A on my first college class in high school, by the way, I was all excited. And my dad just asked me a straight up question. He said, did you learn anything? I said, Dad, of course I learned something. I got an A on a test. He said, Caleb, there's a lot of people that get A's on tests that don't have a heart of learning. And so I then was challenged to be anytime I go and learn from someone, don't just try to check the box, but seek to understand. And even though reading is tough for me, I almost had a 4.0 in college. And now looking back, I go why did I even go to college? but at the time, all the professors liked me because I really worked hard, went to the office after class and really got down to what they were talking to me about. And then the last story that I'll say that kind of shaped my upbringing was when I was 12 years old, I had an incredible, embarrassing moment, I'll say. And I was at a Bible camp and we were doing some kind of play. And I don't know what the play was all about. All I remember is I was up on stage, totally blanked what I was going to say, pulled out my note card that I wrote on messy 2 lines that I needed to say, and every single word sounded out painfully. It seemed like it was 3 minutes of me just sounding out every word. And I don't remember what it was. I just remember feeling totally defeated. And I went to my mom the next day and she said, Caleb, things that you can't control, like your height, don't worry about. But this is really important. I want people to get this. But the things that you can control, like your reading, like how you show up, like your attitude, you have a moral obligation to change that. And you need to start taking control of the things that you can control. So my parents did not let me play the victim. Although reading was hard for me, they made me try even harder. And I don't share this with a lot of people, but I ended up graduating college a year early. And didn't come naturally to me, but I learned another one of my favorite quotes is by Simon Sinek, and he talks about the solutions that you find to your weaknesses growing up become your greatest strength. And I learned strengths that I really doubled down on that I wouldn't trade them for anything. And so I just being homeschooled and having great parents, they taught me how to embrace the things I was good at and never let me become a victim. We would get in trouble for pouting. As kids, my parents did not want to raise victim mentality minded kids. And so I'm just grateful for that. But I will say I learned all the money stuff and business stuff from other people. And that's another thing I'd recommend is have your kids learn from other people other than you. And I just learned from some people that poured into me, encouraged me. And I was just grateful to learn at a young age a lot of these things that we're going to be delving into.
Sure. At what age did you realize you had interest or intrigue, curiosity, whatever words you want to use, about finance, wealth, money? Because listen, there's a lot of people that are, that cut grass or go work somewhere and they start making money so that they can either get a car or do something like that, on whatever that might be. But it appears as if there was an age that you started studying some of they shouldn't be the deeper things, but they're the deeper things of finance and wealth. When was that?
It was at the age of 15 when I started making money working at the chicken farm, and I read a book by Richest Man in Babylon, and that's what got me going. Before that, I've always been frugal. So I always hated to spend my own money, so that was something that was more ingrained in me. But I didn't have the investor maximizer mentality.
Right. So you're frugal. So did that frugality come? I'm going to ask you, because I really think this is important. I'm going to ask you a few more questions about your home, because I've recently put a lot more thought into kind of how I grew up and how money was perceived. Did you ever hear from your parents statements like, and we hope they're listening in. We're not ever going to say anything bad about parents, but we all need to understand ourselves. Did you ever hear anything like, we can't go there, we don't have enough money, or close the door, you're going to let all the store-bought air out, or something like that? Do you recall any of those type, let's call them lack
Yeah,
statements?
I call them like scarcity moments. And
Mm.
so here's so here's a positive. My dad makes good money. He's a very, very smart guy. And yet he drives a Ford Fusion. Okay. And he doesn't buy any cars new. And while I grew up in a nice house, we never, like when we would go to eat, we would never get a drink, mainly, or fries, for health reasons, but also money reasons. My mom would always coupon. And so, like, even though my parents didn't necessarily need to do that, that's they inhibit, they're very frugal. And so, yes, I did get some of that, but I don't think I got the negative side. My default is scarcity, by the way. My default is
Okay.
like, I don't want to spend that. Like, I need to be more generous. I hate spending money, period. I'm very obsessive with that. So that's definitely from my upbringing, and there's some positives and negatives. I will say most business owners go out of business because they need to be a little bit more frugal and a little bit more tight with their money,
I
and people
agree.
just run out of money in general. Yeah.
To kind of give a contrast on that, Caleb, that would have been my mindset. I had this overly optimistic mindset that there was always more out there, that I was going to invest, put money, and spend. And I had to be purged of that through a business situation that we went through in 2008. But so it's real interesting there. You guys, you said your father's a molecular biologist. You didn't eat French fries because probably he knew what they actually were, correct?
Yeah, I would say so. I grew up taking vitamins, eating very healthy, and that's another thing I'm really grateful for. And we could talk an hour about health. By the way, I love that, and I'm grateful for that
Yeah.
upbringing.
I may want to ask about that, but I did want to peel away. So in general, your home life was more of frugal, not necessarily scarcity, because that sometimes can be seen as a negative, but it was like, we make money, but we're going to hold on to what we have as best we can, correct?
Yeah. So I graduated college in 3 years, stayed home, and paid a total of $21,000 for tuition for a bachelor's degree at a
Mhm.
UW system, and had more money after graduating college. So I don't. I see it as a good thing. Though here's the difference. I grew up on a frugal platform, and then I met people that talked to me about entrepreneurship, talked to me about investing, talked to me about all this stuff. And by the way, I would have never been drawn to that because it would have been too risky. So I really feel like super blessed, and I don't get to talk about this ever, but I feel really blessed that I got raised, and I'm an optimistic person, but
Yeah.
I'm very skeptical when it comes to money because I've seen multiple people get burned and go back down to zero. So I've grew up on a solid foundation, but I also got mentored and encouraged to fail forward, to take risk, to do other things, where my parents will be the first to say that they're savers, but they're not investors.
Right. So was it, again, this is kind of, I really want, like to get into the mindset of this.
Yeah.
Did you at 15 look at your parents? And again, we love our parents. We're not saying anything against them, and say, I can't get that financial wealth mindset here, so I'm going to pursue it? Or was it something you stumbled into? Was it some divine connections? What exactly happened? Because the reason I bring it up, Caleb, is because I vividly recall, when I was late in high school, saying to myself, I love my parents, I love what they did, but they were both they were educators, and I love teaching and coaching. I still kind of do that today, really. But I found out how much they made, and I said, you know what? I want to make a lot more than that. So I'm going to do some other
Yeah.
things. Made a conscious effort. Did you look and say, okay, I've gotten a lot of basic foundation here, but I've got to go pursue other people to get some more info?
I read Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The One Thing, all before age 18. And then I got connected with a guy who got me a job at a bank. And then I asked someone who sold their last company to Warren Buffett, super successful, probably worth $500 million, to mentor me when I was like 18 years old. And that was a terrifying moment, but him being in my life and like pouring into me, and then times that once I took over the bank's investment department, all that 100% trumped or added on to my foundation. So my foundation got me to 15, had money in the bank, got me interested in what's seeking better ways. But then Audible, thank God for Audible, and podcast really helped supplement what that was. And again, when I hear something, I remember it. And so I picked up on all these things, and I realized, like, Think and Grow Rich, very controversial book, by the way. But I was like, man, I want to dedicate my life to become the most valuable person I could be. So an example is I could have made twice as much money after year 2 at the bank working for other people. I stayed at the bank, made less money because I understood that was a platform that I would be able to be more valuable, that I would learn to be more valuable. I wanted to be more valuable to the people that I was working with. And so it wasn't even a hard decision, where my mom would have said, Caleb, you could have made twice as much money. Should have gone to work. And for me, it was like, I wouldn't even consider it, because I knew, like, God put on my heart in a young age, like, this is what I'm going to be doing. And so I look at things like, how do I get momentum? A book that I just recently read called Smart Cuts is something that I like naturally do. Like, I look for trends, I look for momentum, and I have a very long-term mentality when I do things. And so I always saw the bank as the number one platform for me to create the most value, starting with myself and then going out and helping other people.
Sure. And it may not have been that you were, I'll use this word, intentional about being in the banking industry, but especially at a young age, that gives credibility that one can't just get anywhere. Whether it's truly should be the credible thing that it is. I mean, because banks really are in many ways just a management organization. A lot of people are intimidated because there's money that's there. But you brought up something, Think and Grow Rich, controversial book. I'd like to hear you say why you think it's controversial.
I think a lot of, so it's funny that I'm on this podcast, because if I ever do recommend it to someone who's a Christian, I always say, take this with a grain of salt. Because there's some things that are said in that are almost like, as a believer, they're like, oh, this is like, it's rich, like, throw it out. But like, I ask almost everyone I talk to that I admire, like, what books do you recommend? And I'm telling you, there's a theme, and Think and Grow Rich has been up there and has influenced a lot of the people that I admire. So, and also, I've read that book 6 times, and I take it with a grain of salt, but I think there's a lot there, and it comes down to this idea of how we think. And again, wealth starts in how we think. A lot of people read my book or listen to my show or hear me speak, and they're like, they want a tactic. There's nothing wrong with tactics. I love efficiency hacks, but I'm telling you, you are missing the point if you don't understand that wealth begins with how you think, and it really doesn't determine how much money is in your bank account. Like, hearing your origin story, you are living a wealthy life. I don't know what you have as far as money, but I know that you're asking the right questions. You get it. And so that's why I just want that to be more the metric than money in a bank account.
Yeah, it's real interesting. It's great that you bring that up, because I've had to reflect on this, is that we lived what many people, I think defining success is what's critical for many people. And there was a time that the way I was defining success was having a challenge. And so anyway, but there's one more kind of, I guess, who Caleb is that I want to find out about before we start getting into some specific strategies. You've brought up the dyslexic situation a few times. And you also brought up that, we could, use our strengths to our fullest. And many people would consider that a challenge or a hurdle to overcome. But it's almost as if the tone and the way you bring it up doesn't seem that way. Can you talk more about that? And I guess give some practical, if someone's listening and they have some similar things, or they have a child or someone, what can they do to help that person through that, if you could?
Yeah. So the solutions that we find to our weaknesses can become our greatest strengths. And so I bring this up quite a bit because there are insecurities that we all have. And for me, my big two insecurities growing up was that I looked super young. My little sister, younger sister, I should say, looked older than me for a good chunk of my life. And then number two, I hated the game apples to apples. Like that gives you an example of like, I didn't never want to be put in a situation where I had to read aloud. And I had more stress and anxiety when I had to read aloud because my identity was in how people viewed me. I want that to land. So even when I was 17, 18, my identity was how people viewed me. The reason I love Think and Grow Rich so much is there's a part in the book that you have to get down deeper to your deeper root fear. My deepest root fear was the fear of poverty. Why? I'd have no clue because my parents would never let me go on the street, and I have countless friends and family that would never let me just starve on the street. So why do I fear poverty? I actually feared being the ultimate failure by writing a book talking about money and then failing financially myself. And so when I saw that, I said, this is going to be the number one thing since I'm on this show. This is the number one thing that Satan's going to use. This is the number one hurdle that will be put in my head or in my way. And I would say majority of people are not living the life to their fullest because they're afraid of criticism. They're afraid of what other people are going to say. They're afraid. And then when I realized like, I have one life. I know I'm young, but I've already lived 1/4 of my life. Dude, you've lived half of your life and you're probably more. So the point that I'm making is like, I realize I'm going to die someday and I don't want to live life with any regret. I don't want to live life and be like, man, I played it safe here. I played because like there's a common theme of all the people that I've admired that they would give a lot to go back. They would go a lot to go back. And so I just like, I realized like, man, I don't want to live in anxiety and fear. In college, I got anxious over tests. I don't know why, but it was that moment when I was like, I'm not going to worry about this and I'm actually going to embrace this. And now I'm very open with my weaknesses because I want people to know that I'm human. And I know that whether it's you have troubles, like you have to like look within because it's hard to move ahead if you have anxieties because then you're always vulnerable. Then I would be nervous if you asked me a question on this podcast, or I'd be nervous to speak because someone would have the trump card. And at the end of the day, like I've already been publicly criticized on podcast. Like that's tough. And my identity is not on what someone that doesn't know me thinks. And so I'm sorry for that little rant, but like I get really fired up about this because people are being held back. And I just like, you're all going to die. And I have a reminder. It might be morbid, but I have a reminder of how many boxes I check off of years I've lived. And even though I'm young, everyone tells me you're young. If I live to 100, I've already lived 1/4 of it. And it went really quick. And so I just want to be a steward of the gifts and time that God's given me. And so that's kind of what's gone into why I share that. But my hope is if you're watching this or you're listening to this, that you can do some self-reflection because man, I'll just stop there.
Well, no, that's excellent because what I heard was that we have to not allow others or the thought of others or others' thoughts about us, because really I actually interacted with someone. I was almost a business partner with someone who had what I would call a high level of fear of poverty. They grew up in poverty. We did a lot of work together. And it was a bit of that root, Caleb, of being fearful of going back. You said you never knew it, but there's also this other piece to it, this layer in our world today, and that is that it's very difficult to fail privately. It's very difficult to fail and no one know about it. And we're not, because it's an awesome podcast already, if this were the worst podcast episode ever, then we would almost be guaranteed for it to go viral because
it's so true, man.
I'm not putting it out there for anybody to do that. I mean, you could share it all you want. In fact, I ask people to share it, but not for that reason. But literal epic fails is something that goes viral. And in many ways, that impacts our money also, because we're not just living in a fear of what other people are thinking, we're attempting to live to impress those people. Can you talk about that? Because I realized that was a little bit of the issues that I've had. And I noticed that with some people around me, that they are trying to do things to impress people that really don't give a rip what they think one way or the other. Talk
Yep.
about that and the impact on finances and wealth.
Entrepreneurs are worse, by the way, like on this, because we hold ourselves to a standard. But like, I realize in my upbringing, this is one positive thing with my upbringing, is my identity is not in what's on the outside. And then when I got into this space and start working with entrepreneurs, I mean, we have a company that we're working with entrepreneurs in almost all 50 states. And I'm realizing that people are very outward focused, and I'm realizing that that's what sells. And it's really sad to me. And and again, it just goes back to, if you know that you're going to die someday, and if you realize that those people really don't care about you, like the amount of time that I'm going to think about your money is like zero.
Yeah.
And so it's like, when you understand that people really don't care, I do think like there's some peace in that, because it just goes like, listen, I'm not accountable for your decisions. I'm accountable for mine. And so that's kind of like the process that I have. But like, the reason I think a lot of people is their identity. Again, we have an identity crisis in America and in this world. And so everything can be chalked up to their identities in the wrong thing. Because if your identity's in the right thing, why would you do those certain decisions?
Right.
And so that's what I would say.
So I'm going to pile on to that, because to me, I think this is critical for people. And I brought it up briefly earlier, but let's talk a little bit about success and how we define success. What I want to ask you first is, how do you define success? And then I'm going to go ahead and follow it up so you can just kind of keep going. Is, what do you observe, good and bad, in the way others define success? I think all this is sort of related, so take that and run with it.
Yeah. It's interesting that you asked that question, because this is one of the first questions that we ask people. We really want to get down to your deeper root. And one of the questions that we ask is, how do you define financial success? So thank you for asking. I made a mission statement for myself after doing the funeral test of like, what, like, I'm going to die someday and people really don't care about my successes. So what do I want people to, like, that are going to be at my funeral to just think? And so I view success as an ability to help people see and reach their highest potential. And that word's really key, because helping people see, I believe most people don't even see their God-given potential that they have. Like, I'm getting emotional when I think about this, because so many people are created for a greater purpose, and that could go for it, and they're not reaching it because they don't see it in themselves. And so if there's one thing that I could do, is help people see it. And then I actually do, and this is where the wealth piece comes in, I actually want to be a helper. I don't want to be the hero. I want to be the person that comes alongside you and helps you do what you should do. And so it's interesting. My mission has nothing to do with God, but I internally believe that you're not going to reach your highest potential in life if you don't have your identity set on the creator, the person that actually formed us to begin with. And so that is how I would answer how I see success. And that's why I get so motivated in business, is because I see it on a daily basis. Whether I see it in person or not, I know the work that we're doing is helping people see, but then actually helping people live that. And then what's interesting is my dad wrote a book called The Original Prescription, which it's pretty much every decision we make with our health has ripple effects. Same thing goes with our time, our money, and our abilities. If I help you show up more powerfully as it relates to business because I help you get money, think about the impact that you can have by all the people that you're impacting. So incredibly selfish. I understand the importance of leverage. Leverage is like the secret to wealth. And my mission is really how to help people create leverage in life, not just through money, but through impact. And so that's just how I think about success.
Yeah, that's good. It's real interesting how close that is to a saying that I have, because as a business coach, as a executive coach, I actually say that part of what I do is reach down inside people and pull out what God placed there at the beginning and help bring it to manifestation or bring it to light. So, we are both, this is the reason that we connected so well, because we're both aligned with that. And does that have a very strong spiritual component? Absolutely. Is it all spiritual stuff? No. Listen, like you brought up, let's talk about something that's even in another area, health. What does it do for our lives if we have X amount in the bank, but yet our health, we've lost that? And I really it's been real challenging. We've recently gone through a situation where my father is going through some cognitive issues, and I'm being reminded of some of those things. And so one of the things I'm reminded of is really that success is really encompassing a lot of things. But I heard you say something, I think this may be a good merge into you. I think it was that you brought up on the podcast or something I was reading about you. You really spoke about the need for that financial foundation or something to that effect. I mean, we're in a world today. Listen, we know that money doesn't define us, but poverty doesn't either.
Thank you.
So talk about that foundation, and maybe we're starting to get into some of the tips and some of the teaching and training and strategies, but talk about that, and let's start moving into some of the things you do with Better Wealth Podcast and, the financial coaching. And then we're going to talk about your book in a little while also.
Cool. I would, one of the reasons I'm passionate about health, and just to go off of that, is the guy that helped co-found Better Wealth, who's like a second father to me, died 2 years ago with cancer. Like, he left 3 kids under the age of 18, by the way. And I walked through that with him, and people say, like, Caleb, you're an old soul. Well, part of the reason I'm an old soul is, like, I've witnessed that, like a second father to me who's like believed so much in me, who became one of my first clients when he had he should not have been. And then in fact was in the way of leaving what he was currently doing to come help me build this full time. And I just saw that happen, and I realized, like, we're not guaranteed anything. And so just to go off of that, so money needs to be at the foundation. And I've found that most people don't even have a framework or a way of thinking about how to use money, how to think about money. And so if you would like, I would like to share with you, like, the 4 principles that we preach day in and day out here, because I find that, like, this, you people can come on, talk about tactics and all this stuff, but if you don't have an understanding, it does not matter. So
yeah, let's do it. Let's go. Yeah, okay. Go. This is a great time to do that.
So principle number 1 is all about clarity. One of my favorite word pictures is Alice in Wonderland, when she gets to the fork in the road and the cat says, Alice, where do you want to go? And she says, I don't know. And he says something very, very important. You don't know where you want to go. Any road will get you there. Majority of people don't even know where they want to go. Hence why we ask so many questions to help people get clear. ROR for us does not have anything to do with rate of return. ROR for us has everything to do with return on results. If you can articulate what you actually want, nothing else that I say matters. And is it not true that if we don't have a target that we're headed towards, it can be easy to get distracted? I went running the other day, and I knew exactly where the house was, and I would not have made it if I didn't know that, like, that's where I was headed. Running in Colorado can be rough. Principle number 2, efficiency. And when you think about efficiency, think about optimization. This will give you a better understanding of how I think about money. By the way, big fan of using money as a tool. And I really poverty literally holds you back. Like, it literally, there's reasons why, if there's reasons why you can't show up powerfully in the world, and it's money, like, we need to fix that in ASAP. And so there's 3 things as it relates to efficiency. Think about efficiency, turning the mirror back on you. Everyone wants to hear about strategies in my book and all that. Let's look back at you and, like, let's self-analyze what you're doing. In fact, we believe so much in this. We have a financial x-ray, a financial assessment that we can walk people through this. But there's 3 things that we're analyzing. Number 1 is cash flow. We're asking the question, how do we optimize cash flow? Our lives are based on cash flow. And so number 1, how can we increase it? Number 2, how can we optimize it? And number three, how do we track it and all these things? And so we're like, we ask the question, is my cash flow best serving me for the, and we go back to principle number one in the results that I want. Number two, we look at assets under efficiency and ask the question, is this home? Are these retirement accounts? Are these investments? Is this car? Whatever you identify as an asset, is this thing that I own best serving me to help me live the life that I want to live? And a lot of people are doing what they've been told, but they're realizing you're a business owner and you're maxing out your 401k and then you're complaining that you don't have any money. Well, maybe we should go against the typical way of thinking about money and saying, maybe this 401k might be a good asset for some, but might not be the best asset to serve me and where I want to go. So the number one thing, second thing that we need to do is audit the assets that we have. And the third thing is debt. And isn't it not true that so many people are drowning in debt? And I'm really I get fired up about good debt and bad debt because I think there's some people out there that say all debt is bad. And just like I don't think any one thing or statement as relates to money is bad, I think debt can be used as an instrument to be amazing. In chapter 3 in my book, I talk about mortgages. And in most cases, I think mortgages are an amazing instrument to help you create more control and more wealth. That's not typical, like that's going against the grain. But I also think a lot of people are in bad debt. And how I define good debt is it's using that instrument to put more money in your pocket, create more control, and have more security. Bad debt does the exact opposite. A quick debt hack is if you take your balance and divide it by the monthly payment, you're going to get some kind of number. If that number is less than 50, we need to go focus and get that debt knocked off. That is bad debt. You have a ton of cash flow going to that bad debt. If that debt is above 100, I would highly encourage you to take a step back, take a breather, and be okay with it. And there's exceptions to the rules always, but a lot of times people don't know how to think about debt. And I think we need to think about debt in the form of cash flow. And so that is we call that the cash flow scorecard. And if it's under 50, if it's within 50 to 100, you might there's some options, but if it's over 100, that may be a debt instrument that's good. So that's something that you can do at home.
Sure.
So,
repeat that equation one more time so people hear you went quick there.
Yeah. You take
total
your
debt.
Balance. You take your no. You take each debt. You take your balance. So if you have a mortgage, you have credit card debt, whatever. You take that balance. You divide it by your monthly payment. That's going to kick out a number. The lower the number, what that tells me is a lot of your cash flow is getting eaten up by that debt. And if we eliminate that debt, it's going to free up more cash flow.
That's good.
The higher the number, that's essentially saying, hey, this debt may be an instrument to better take your money and do something else with it.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks for repeating that because we went through that quick. Okay, what's next?
Okay. Principle number 3 is all about consistency. One thing that I've seen multiple times is the consistent person will win in the end. And we need to be consistent in 2 areas. So think of C squared when you write these 2 down. Consistent in long term. Number 1, if you are going to build wealth, we need to think multiple generations. Our head wealth coach, Jeremy, his favorite quote is, a wise man plants trees that he will never sit under. We have to think long term. And I think this is where Americans in general I will be careful with my wording here, are awful in because they're just like, we are so instant gratification. And so when we play the long-term game, we have to understand that every decision we make has a consequence. Going back to time value of money, $1 today is worth way more than $1. $1 lost today is worth way more than just $1. When I talked about this idea of money, and in the book that I wrote, I talk about paying $10,000 for my first car in cash. I was super proud of myself until I realized that one decision that I did cost me probably over $500,000 over my life, because that $10,000 is never able to grow for me ever again. And so I taught this principle to someone that I was mentoring, actually Greg's children that I've been taking a mentorship role in. And they were like, I took them out to lunch and it was $64, like the buffet. And they said, Caleb, thank you so much for treating, but we know that costs you more than $64. And being the nerd that I was like, I took out my phone. I'm like, let's actually do the financial calculation here. And we found over my life, Tim, that that $64 meal cost me over $4,000. So every decision we make has a long-term effect. The second C is all about control. Some people call the 8th one of the world compounding. And while I don't necessarily buy into that, I don't think Albert Einstein ever said that. If he did, I would say the ninth one in the world is control. And I would take control every day versus just compounding. Compounding is a function of math. It's a function of your money growing over a period of time. It's great. It's just math. But I believe, especially if we're talking about entrepreneurs, especially if we're taking someone that has a mission greater than themselves, the ability to control capital is your greatest financial need. The example that I use in my book is, what is the rate of return? What is the power of a golf club? If you're like me and not good at golf, it's actually negative because playing golf costs me money. But if your name is Phil Mickelson, a golf club can make you hundreds of millions of dollars. What's the difference? It's not the golf club, it's how you use it. The same thing goes with your money and your ability. And so I would just do an audit. Like some people, if you have more control of your money, you're going to bankrupt yourself. That doesn't make control bad. That makes your use of control bad. The same thing goes with, just anything in life. But I believe we need to seek control because in my study, and I looked at how banks make money and how Wall Street makes money and how the wealthy make money, they're all control freaks. They're giving us some kind of promise for the future to control our capital. Banks are just institutions that control our money better than us. And so when I realized that, I'm like, okay, I had this dilemma in life where I wanted to have control over money to start my own business, but I also knew this thing called compound interest is an amazing thing. And so that my book is just that addresses that simple dilemma. And I teach people how they can grow their money efficiently for the long term, but still maintain control of their capital to invest in their business, to, invest in real estate, invest in whatever God's put on your heart, but to be more efficient in how you save and use your money. And so that my book talks a lot about money principles, but it focuses on the third principle, which is consistency.
Okay.
And then,
number 4, you said there are 4, right?
Yes. Number 4 is all about use. Your greatest financial need is using money. And I would say you should use your money in a way that you want to live your life. And that is, and I love, people ask me, Caleb, where should I invest my money? I go back to principle number 1 and say, what did you tell me you really wanted? What's your definition of success? What results do you want? You should use your money in a way to get that. And so, should you pay off your debt or invest? That all depends. Draw a T-chart. What investment activities can you do, whether it's your business, your podcast, the stock market? What kind of debts do you have? Put a metric on that, and that's where you should spend your money. Where should I spend my time? Depends. Let's look at what you want. It blows me away how many people say one thing and do the exact opposite with their time and money. I just think if you have the freedom of being clear of what you want, it's super easy. Like, we will be able to help every single person that has clarity in what they want. You might not like the answers, but it's not complicated. And so use your money in a way that will best help you live the life that you want. So principle number 1, clarity. Principle number 2 is efficiency. Principle number 3 is, once you have money, be consistent long-term and short-term. Don't choose between one or the other. Number 4 is use your money in a way that best aligns with the life that you want.
Yeah, very good. Now, is this covered in your book? Do you go through these principles there? Tell us a little bit about the book now, and then there are a few other questions as we begin wrapping up. I kind of do I rap for a while. Tell us about it.
Yeah, and I have time. I really appreciate being on here. My book is called The And Asset, and it's essentially, it says the secret way to save and use your money at the same time. I wrote this over 2 years ago. I wouldn't have used the word secret because I think that's kind of a scammy word. and you ask, are the 4 principles in there? They are, but they're not spelled out because I really came up with the 4 principles after this book was written. But a lot of that you'll see which is in here. And it's all about efficiently using our money. And it's really overfunding special type of life insurance contracts. And when you do that, your money, it's interesting because life insurance is like an expense. But if you reverse engineer it and you put as much money in and as little insurance as possible, it's actually an amazing place to store your capital where it will grow the long term. But you can also use that capital to invest in other things. And when I hated life insurance when I first started. And then when I truly understood it, I realized it's not the what, it's the how people are using it. It's how people are teaching it. And it can be an amazing foundational asset to store your capital and use it throughout your life. And I see money through the lens of efficiency rather than through the lens of rate of return. And then when you understand that this is an and versus an or, that's when the aha moment came out for me. And that's when I ultimately knew that although this is far from perfect, I needed to get my thoughts on paper. Ironically, the kid that hates to read writes a book. I just found it was at the time the best leverage point that I could do to getting this information out in the world.
Yeah, and I saw that book just a few days ago, so I wasn't able to get that and do a read through, but it doesn't look like it is a War and Peace 680 pages book. It's more of it's easy read, or not easy with content, but easy as far as
No,
correct.
the best feedback I've gotten is, Caleb, this is the simplest book I've read on money. I
Wow.
feel like it's written by a fourth grader. You know why? Because I spoke it.
Oh,
So
okay. You spoke. So that's how you got in, right? I just finished writing a novel, and I could tell you these two fingers typing everything out was quite the chore. So,
yeah, no,
um,
I'm not that good, man. But I had a lot of help, and
yeah,
it's easy to understand. And I think people just get it.
that's good. Tell us also about the Better Wealth and what all you guys are doing with that. I know you've got an organization, you're doing some coaching, some financial training. I think you also have a podcast there. I listened to an episode or two there. So tell us about the scope of the companies and the projects that you're working with, so people know. This is probably going to be leading into how they can connect with you in a little while, but give us a little bit of a background there first.
Yeah. So when I left the bank at 21 years old, I knew that I needed to get this information out to the world, and I couldn't
Uh,
just be held back to the corner office. So leaving, we started Better Wealth. It actually was Better Wealth Solutions at the time because I was too cheap to buy the domain betterwealth.com. And so we just started from the basement of Papa John's building, and then I just had this belief that if people understood what I was teaching, there'd be a line outside the door. And so with that, some people came on board, and everyone has taken a step backwards before we could pay them fully. We got the book out. I started the Better Wealth podcast. I started speaking. And then I just think something happened where the momentum of showing up consistently every day just kind of blew up. And so that's that. Now people can check us out at betterwealth.com. They'll see that we're a company that serves people all around the country. We're currently working with 46 out of the 50 states right now. And we believe in education, number one. We believe in financial coaching, number two. And we believe in implementation, number three. And we can help people with all three. And we just walk people through the 4 steps. We also have an independent financial model. I'm a nerd. I believe every financial decision can be modeled independently using a cash flow ratio model. And so we do that for our clients. And then we help people set up strategies, whether it's what I write in my book or different retirement strategies. And it goes back to intentional living. And so it went from me to now we have over 15 people on our team. And I don't even meet one-on-one with people anymore. Again, because we have this audacious mission of wanting to impact 1 million people in the next 5 years. And I can't do that one-on-one. So we have built a team, and what I'm most proud of is the people that I get to surround myself with, that wake up every day with this mission to inspire more people. And I'm just grateful to just be a part of such an amazing team and see the growth. And with that comes challenges. Don't get me wrong, but the internet's a beautiful thing. And when I first started, people thought I was crazy. People thought it was really actually disrespectful for me to start at such a young age. And now it's funny because everyone's calling me because they're like, man, we do everything virtually. And now even the financial advisors that never knew how to turn on a computer are finding out what Zoom is. And they're like, hey, how do you do this thing again? And I'm like, don't even try. Like,
well,
I'm not, like, I could try to tell you what we do, but it's just it's gonna put you in your grave.
Well, I was
To
going to
me.
ask you, we're recording this in late summer 2020 when, the world has somewhat changed. And obviously you're growing a business in the midst of this. Have you seen um, anything that has slowed you down, anything that sped you up? Are you well positioned? It seems as if that you may have been well positioned for the transitions that have occurred, the new normal, the reset, whatever words you want to use. How are you guys doing through all this? I'm speaking to your
We hired
company and
3
your
people.
clients.
Yeah, we hired 3 people since this whole pandemic thing happened. Here's why. Number 1, we've been telling people that this was going to happen. Number 2, none of our clients lost money. Number 3, we had systems that totally allowed us to scale. And so I think all those things have resonated. The number one thing that will hurt a company like ours is uncertainty. So there was a period of time that people were just uncertain. They didn't even know if they were going to have a job. And so with that, we intentionally with our clients, like we intentionally did not have a profitable month because we did the right thing by our clients. There were some people that were ready to make a decision. We just waited because that's the right thing to do. And so, with uncertainty, every business, quite frankly, except maybe like guns and gold or whatever, everything else gets hurt. And now I think people are realizing, hey, this is somewhat of the new normal, which I don't really love that term, but like this is what we're needing to expect. Let's embrace a financial strategy that will help us show up powerfully next time, because our clients are better off for having working with us because of this.
Right. All right. You said something very quickly that I'm not going to let it just kind of float away. And that is, you said, we knew this was going to happen. So I'm going to ask you to kind of go a little deeper on that. What do you mean by we knew this was going to happen?
If you look at the amount of debt that we have as a country, if you look at our I think taxes are low. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, but there was a time that the highest tax rate was 92%. You look at what's going on with student debt right now as we record, 9% of mortgages are in forbearance. So you see all this going on, and then you see no one's saving money. When I say nobody, that's not like, don't take that as like a straight up statement, but majority of people are not saving money. Social Security is going to go broke. We're just headed towards if something happens, we are screwed as a country. And look at what happens. People lose their job and have no money. Yeah. And my political views aside, like I don't think it's sustainable for a country to just print money and send it out. But like bad things will happen the moment that gravy train stops, because people are not positioned. We're over leveraged across the board. A lot of people take me out of context. They're like, Caleb, you're pro leverage, you're pro debt. No, I'm pro buying things within your means and then using the best instrument to buy that. The problem with debt is it allows you to inflate what you can afford. So I just see people are super over leveraged and we're not seeking value. And then my generation is totally out of their minds as it relates to what they're going to school for and how they see money, how they view politics. And I just think it's a recipe for massive change. It's a recipe for massive taxation. And although at the time of this recording, the markets are still up because of the amount of money we're printing and shoving in. That's not sustainable either. So all that going in and just using common sense, it's like, this can't continue to happen. And what we're seeing is not true reality.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier the short-term nature of our culture. And I will, most mornings, sometime during the morning, I'll pop open just my financial app with a little bit of financial news. And I am constantly amazed. You mentioned the market, so we're not going to go deep into it, but I'm constantly amazed when the market goes up, and we'll say the market, either the Dow or the S&P, whatever you'd want to say is quote unquote the market, which is not a real good thing to really measure. But the headlines are something like, this is really irritating to me, so I'm going to rant just a minute. The headlines will say something like, markets go up on hopes of a vaccine. And I'm going, how did they make that soundbite that makes no sense whatsoever, that Apple would go up, Apple computer stocks would go up, which is carrying the market up a good way, because there's vaccine. That makes no sense whatsoever. So anyway, that little mini rant on my part, I don't know if you agree or disagree, but
here's my philosophy with the stock market is, if you have a purpose in life, if you're especially an entrepreneur listening to this, you have on one hand something that you don't understand. I don't even understand. Okay. And you're investing money in companies that you don't know what's going on, and people like you. So you're investing money, and I call that the hope strategy. Like, historically it will grow, but I would just really ask yourself, what is the opportunity cost of where that money could go? And if you're an entrepreneur, you might have a moral obligation to take that money and invest it in yourself in something that you can better control. And in fact, there's more to life than just appreciation. There's more to life than just growth. Money should be multidimensional. In my book, I talk about 16 benefits. Unfortunately, Americans just look at one.
Yeah, very narrow, very narrow. And I think a lot of those headlines are because that's what feeds the masses of the people there. So who would be someone that would be your ideal client, or the client that would be a good fit? And if there's not one, but I would guess you probably have a profile. So tell us who that might be, especially because the listener might be going, I'd like to talk to this guy. I'd like to reach out to him. Let's go ahead and try to match that up if we can. Yeah.
Our ideal client is somebody who already values control and does, like, if you, a lot of people, a common question I will get is, Caleb, how can I start the and asset? That's what I wrote my book on. And if you don't have $10,000 to start the and asset, we as a company pivot or do something different for you. And to get started working with our team, it's $1,000. So there might be some people here that are not a good fit. And I would highly recommend you listen to the show. You get my book. If you reach out to me, I'll figure out a way to get you a free copy of the book. Like I'm a big fan of education, but I would say the person that is ideal to work with us seeks control and can save at least $10,000 a year and sees the value of having an independent coach, not an investment babysitter, but a coach to help them understand those 4 principles.
Yeah, that's good. And you say you guys are currently in 48 states. Is that correct?
46 states. We can serve all 50, but we just come as if someone comes that we're not licensed yet, we get the proper licenses.
Because that is because you have some there's some products that you offer that you have licenses for in those areas. So great. Where can people connect with you, Caleb? How can they get in touch with you? Go ahead. We'll put them in the notes, but let us know how people can get in touch with you.
So if you go to betterwealth.com, that's betterwealth.com, you can find out all about us as it relates to our podcast, our YouTube channel, the book. And then if you're into podcasts, want to learn more, if you type in Better Wealth into your podcast, it will come up with my show. But betterwealth.com is the best way to learn more. And you can take the free financial assessment and see how you currently are doing financially.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you for that. And we'll include that down in the notes and recommend that people get the book and other things. I think they could find all that there. What's next for you? Or I'm going to ask you, no, I'll ask that. What's next for you?
So it's interesting because I'm a visionary. I'm a dreamer. I'm ultimately trying to build $1 billion enterprise and platform to help people with this. And so what's next for me is we're building what's called Better Wealth Network. We're in the process of starting 2 additional podcasts with not me involved. We're starting a vlog. We're starting, I'm trying to figure out how do I get some of the best financial minds to come on board and to produce content, because I believe the future is media companies. So that's number 1. Number 2, we're designing our platform to scale within silos. And I'm doing that because I see that that's where the future is going. I feel like the future of financial advising is dying, and the people that don't innovate won't be relevant in 10 years. And so we're trying to build our platform to scale using technology, but we have a saying around here, scale the unscalable. So we never want to take the human touch out, but we want to use technology to get all the inefficiencies. And whenever there's inefficiency, there's a lot of opportunity. And I would say we're in a very opportunistic place being in the financial service business. So that's what's next for us.
That's exciting. Very exciting. Thank you for sharing that. Caleb, the podcast is Seek, Go, Create. And you listen to our origin story, so you kind of know a little bit about where that comes from. And with your background, you could probably guess on a few of those words. But which one of those words jumps out at you and why? Final question here.
Create. I believe that I was created. And I believe that as an American, we are still given an ability to go and create a future. And I just think there's so many things about that word, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an artist, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, there's so many areas that you can go out, create, and make things happen. And I think that if you go back to our roots, that is something that I resonate greatly with.
Awesome. Caleb, thank you so much for joining us on the Seek, Go, Create podcast. It has been a joy, and man, I'm so impressed. You have so much going on, and I just applaud you and just thank you for sharing with our audience. I appreciate all the value that you brought. So thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate you being on the show.